Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling a question that seems, honestly, incredibly simple on the surface, but is actually a surprisingly complex challenge. What exactly is communication? I mean, we literally do it all day, every day, right? Yet somehow, pinning down its exact mechanics is notoriously tricky. Now, if you've ever felt confused trying to define it, you are completely validated here. Way back in 1970, researcher Frank Dance wrote that communication is one of the most overworked terms in the English language. And honestly, the situation hasn't changed a bit. It's a lot like the words culture or community. Ask 100 different people what those words mean, and you're going to get 100 entirely different definitions. But, we aren't going to let that stop us. We need a solid baseline to anchor our understanding. The word communication actually comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to share or to make something common. So, drawing from that, here is our working definition. It's the process by which people transmit information, share verbal and nonverbal messages, and create meaning with each other. Now, pay close attention to those three anchor verbs: transmit, share, and create. And those three verbs are basically going to serve as our mental map for this explainer. We'll start with the transmit era, then move into the share era, leap forward into the create era, and finally, look at how all this branches out into modern fields of study. All right, part one, the transmit era. And this brilliantly illustrates our chronological roadmap. Historically, the most basic, literal way people viewed communication was as a physical container of information. We start all the way back in 1948 with Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver, before hitting Dean Barnlund in 1962 and Robert Craig in 1999. Let's look at what Shannon and Weaver were thinking. So in most textbooks, this 1948 theory is called the information transfer model. It's super straightforward. A sender has a message, they transmit that signal through a channel, and boom, the receiver gets it at its destination. Now, sure, there might be some noise along the way that disrupts the signal, but notice the one absolutely crucial element that is entirely missing here: feedback. In this original container model, the meaning is literally stuffed right there inside the words themselves. The whole goal is just getting the package from point A to point B. To put that into perspective, Shannon and Weaver were engineering types. Back in 1948, they were looking specifically at technology like the telegraph, telephone, and radio systems. Think about a telegraph for a second. It's a completely linear one-way street. The machine doesn't care if the receiving operator is confused or thrilled or bored, it just pushes a signal across a wire. So it's a fantastic model for machinery, absolutely, but it's incredibly limited because it completely ignores the messy, dynamic reality of human reaction. Which brings us to part two, the share era. So the crucial point here is that those mechanical limitations sparked a massive shift in perspective around 1962. Communication evolved from a one-way street into a dynamic, shared experience. Dean Barnlund looked at that old 1948 model where meaning is contained in the words, and he completely flipped it on its head. He introduced the transactional model, arguing that meaning doesn't live in the words at all. Meaning lives in us. It lives right there in our minds. Barnlund pointed out that human communication isn't just a one-way transfer. It's actually a circular, continuous transaction. We aren't just politely taking turns speaking and listening. We are simultaneous senders and receivers. Think about it. Even when you're just silently nodding along to a friend's story, your posture, your eye contact, you are actively sending feedback to them. As the receiver, you're constantly supplying your own interpretation and decoding the meaning. Let's lock this down with a real-world example. Imagine two people in a meeting, hearing their boss say, "We need to talk." One person interprets that as an exciting promotion opportunity, right? While the other immediately assumes, "Oh no, I'm being fired." Because meaning is superimposed by our own unique individual minds, they hear the exact same sentence but collaboratively create entirely different realities. It's not just transmitting anymore, it's sharing. All right, moving right along to part three, the create era. Leaping forward a few decades to 1999 brings us to our most modern and frankly most philosophical perspective yet. Now, what's really interesting about this is this single powerful sentence from researcher Robert Craig: communication constitutes our social reality. Now, don't let the academic language trip you up. The word constitutes simply means creates. Craig is arguing that communication literally creates the world we live in. This is known as the constitutive approach. And in this view, communication isn't just some secondary phenomenon. It's not something we merely do after we have an idea or after we establish a culture. Craig says that communication is the primary generative process that creates those ideas in the first place. We aren't just sharing pre-existing meanings provided by nature, we are generating them together in real time. It is a collective accomplishment, a primary driving social force. If that sounds a little abstract, let's ground it with a real-world example. Think about how a friendship actually begins. A friendship doesn't physically exist out in the wild just waiting to be found, right? It is entirely built, shaped, and maintained through your inside jokes, your texts, your shared conversations. Literally every relationship, every family dynamic, and every societal norm we follow is brought into reality by the creative force of our communication. Let's move to our final section, part 4, and see how this builds into major areas of study. So how did these three massive theories actually branch out into concrete research today? Well, because communication is such a powerful generative force, the field of study is absolutely enormous. It covers rhetoric, going back 2,000 years to Aristotle to explore public speaking and persuasion. It covers interpersonal communication, diving deep into one-on-one relationships. Then there's organizational communication, analyzing workplace culture and leadership. And more recently, health communication has become massive, studying how the exact way a doctor communicates a risk to a patient can literally impact how quickly they recover. The boundaries of this discipline are expanding every single day. Wow, we have covered some incredible ground in this explainer today, moving from seeing communication as the simple transmission of a signal to the shared transaction of meaning, all the way to the generative force that literally builds our social reality. As I mentioned at the start, finding one single definition isn't the true goal here. The goal is recognizing the immense power of how we interact. So as you go about your day, I'll leave you with this to ponder. After seeing these three core models, how would you define communication? Stay curious and keep learning.